The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of 4, 10, and 12.
Faced with a federal deadline, Idaho Power Company took steps this week to upgrade its controversial power plant at Swan Falls Dam, a project some irrigators don't think should happen at all. Tonight, a conversation with Idaho Power Chairman James Bruce. Good evening. Over the past 18 months, the words Swan Falls have come to symbolize a deepening rift between the state's irrigators and its largest producer of electricity, the Idaho Power Company. A 1982 court decision affirmed the power company's water rights at Swan Falls Dam on the Snake River. That case is still in the courts, but at least in theory, it puts several thousand existing farmers in jeopardy, and it raises the specter of no more water for new land development. Since that decision, Idaho Power has twice fought off attempts in the legislature to take its water right away, and the company will no doubt have to fight that same battle in the 1985 legislature. But in the meantime, another hitch arose that could have proven a more immediate threat to the company. Swan Falls is an old dam and a somewhat dilapidated one. The federal government, which licenses such dams, asked Idaho Power to either repair or upgrade it and gave the company until the 1st of June to start the work. Idaho Power chose the upgrade option, which will double the plant's capacity. But as the 1st of June approached, no construction on the dam had started, and company officials began to be concerned. They considered asking for an extension, but instead opted to bring out the bulldozers, several of them from the Morrison-Knudsen Construction Company in Boise. As an Idaho Power photographer watched and recorded the scene, the bulldozers cranked up to begin moving the dirt. As construction goes, Swan Falls is off to a fairly slow start, but company officials seem confident they've made enough progress to satisfy the federal government. Mr. Bruce, let me ask you first, am I accurate in saying that you are confident that that will satisfy the
Yes,
federal?
I believe so. It's in essence, it's the same thing that's happening up at Lucky Peak with the Lucky Peak irrigators. Started construction up there with McGregor Triangle doing some bulldozing work. We had started last fall to rebuild the access road, which was over $1 million to rebuild the access road down into Swan Falls, and we considered that as part of the construction. Obviously it is, because you needed that to get the equipment down to repair and rebuild the dam.
But the feds did not.
Well, they thought that we should start something on the dam itself, or the excavations, the tail race, and that's what we're doing now. And I think it will comply with the requirements.
Had you not been able to do that, had you essentially lost your license, would it then have come under the legal precedents that give a public entity first dibs on a dam right?
Well, if we'd lost the license, but I don't think there was any particular question of losing the license. You see, our license for Swan Falls expired in 1970, and in 1969, myself as general counsel prepared the application for the relicensing, and we had 3 alternatives. And subsequently, in about 1980-81, the commission made the final decision that we should go ahead with a rebuild of the Swan Falls Dam, and they asked us to increase the capability of the power production,
or at least repair it.
Well, repair the dam, plus part of the alternatives was to increase the capability, and in the belief that you should have full utilization out of the power plant. That was part of it.
The State Land Board tried last week to revoke an easement you had to rebuild that dam. How did you get that easement in the first place?
We just made a filing for it and paid some money to the state, and just normal application.
If the state for some reason didn't want you to have it, did they miss an opportunity?
Well, I don't know. I was kind of dumbfounded when I also suddenly got served with a notice about it, but I don't think so. I think it's part of an ongoing, I don't think it's related to the Swan Falls. I think it's related to an ongoing problem that the state is having with respect to easements on the rivers, the riverbed, and lake beds. They have a problem up in Lake Coeur d'Alene and a problem up at Lake Pend Oreille, and I think it's part of an ongoing problem. I really don't think it was I hope it wasn't singled out as a Swan Falls problem.
Well, certainly one member of that land board, at any rate, probably two, don't care much for this project.
Well, I don't think that they have any difference with the project. They want the project to still be there. I'm quite sure they have a little problem with respect to the water rights. They say Idaho Power Company's water rights. I say it differently. I say your water rights. All of us in the vernacular as ratepayers, because we have paid for that as ratepayers. We paid for those dams and those hydroelectric facilities, and over the course of the years, and that's the reason we have the low rates. And so we're really talking about all of us as ratepayers' water rights.
Before we get into that more general issue, and I do want to spend some time on that, let me play devil's advocate and ask you about the theory that some observers are putting forth privately, that you didn't want to ask FERC for an extension for the same reason that you started construction without the usual fanfare that accompanies construction of a new project, essentially because you didn't want to call attention to it and possibly open a can of worms.
No, I don't think so. I think that's probably putting more of a, as far as the company was concerned, we started on the road construction. It's not we don't anticipate, and we haven't done a big fanfare. We haven't had a groundbreaking ceremony, for example, when we work on something in many, many years. We believe that it's just part of the course of business, and that's what we're doing.
The Ada County Planning and Zoning Board, and ultimately I believe the county commissioners, also have to rule on this. Do you expect any problem there?
I wouldn't think so. I really, I can't, I've had no conversation with them, but basically it's a rebuild of a dam that's been there since time began, practically, very early 1900s. If it washed out, it would not be a cause to celebrate because it's not that high a dam, but it would pose some problems to everyone. And what we're doing is, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, we have to make safety checks all the time and check the foundation of the dam and the whole works. And that was part of what the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission said, that we needed to do the things that we're starting to do now.
Let me move on to the more general question of subordination. In a letter to you earlier this month, Governor Evans, who has been a strong proponent of subordination, proposed what he sees as a solution to the dilemma. Essentially, subordination with an increase in the minimum stream flow and some sort of mechanism to regulate the future uses of water. How does that strike you?
Well, I wrote a letter, an answer to that letter, and to the governor last week, and told him that we were certainly willing to meet with the governor at any time, and his staff or whoever he wanted to meet with, and look at the possibilities of any type of solution. There are some problems with it. It's not as easy just saying in a letter, because you have lots of applications that have filed. That's one of the problems that we've been facing all the time, is that there's applications on file with at the Idaho Water Resource Board. That they talk about 3,300 minimum flow at Swan Falls. There's applications up there that if they were all processed, would take the minimum flow far below the 3,300, and that poses a problem. Which one or what group are they going to stop? If I was an attorney representing them, and I had a client that says, I've got this application up there, I'd say to them, you don't stop me, because I'm only taking 10 second feet or something of that nature. I'm not the one that's causing it. So you got each one of those, so you have a real problem with it. Well, what I'm saying in essence is that we're certainly willing to work with the governor in any manner, and we've always been willing to. We proposed the contract, which we sent up a year ago, April, and it's on the governor's desk. We worked with the governor's staff for that contract, which would release. You mentioned earlier the 2,000 present users, but those are users that primarily started after 1976. Mm-hmm. And we would release all those people from the problem so that we could get rid of about 5,000 people that are really utilizing the water. And it had other factors for future utilization for domestic and commercial, non-consumptive commercial and industrial and municipal uses. We think if we could do that, we could get the problem out for a lot of people, and we could sit down in a cool, calm, and collected fashion and see where we're going with respect to those water rights.
What you're really talking about there is the company's willingness to have some sort of partial
That's
subordination.
right. Just exactly right.
That's the theme of a series of ads that the company's been
That's
running.
exactly
I'd like to play one now, one that you were kind enough to loan to us. It's one of the new series that just began running, I believe, last week.
Idaho Power favors subordinating their water rights? Well, sure, to existing water users have all along, ever since the subordination issue came up back in '82. Now, what they don't want to do is give up their remaining water rights to future land developers without you getting paid for it. So now, if somebody tells you that Idaho Power is against subordinating its water rights to existing farmers, you just tell them you know better.
Subordination. We can work it out.
About that last 48.
Think you and the governor can work it out?
Well, I'm hopeful so. We're always hopeful, and the governor's been a good governor, and he's a reasonable man, and I hope so.
In some fundamental sense, ignoring for a moment, assuming you can solve the problems of, as you point out, too many filings already for the water, just the fundamental idea of substituting an increased minimum stream flow for lack of subordination, is that a possible answer to the problem?
Well, it may be. It may be, but it has to be carefully thought out, and the ramifications have to be respected, so that when you're talking about a minimum stream flow, everybody understands that that's what you're talking about, not something that can keep going down.
Yeah, the legislature at this point, if a minimum flow were established, could lower it the next year if they
Well,
wanted
that's
to.
exactly right.
So you'd want some sort of a guarantee that
Well,
this would
certainly.
last.
Well, again, the question of subordination, as far as Idaho Power Company is concerned, is a question of what is probably best for the state of Idaho, and particularly for our ratepayers. We represent 260,000 people, 265,000 people. Those are the people that look at Idaho Power Company and look at their rates. And we have almost the lowest rates in the United States. Well, they expect that. Now, you know, there's been a lot of statements made, and I heard one just a short time ago, that we're only doing it for profit and for the stockholders. Well, basically, it doesn't make one whit of difference to the stockholders of Idaho Power Company, because under public utility law, you're authorized to earn a return, and that return will pay your stockholders. Well, it doesn't make any difference whether your rates are higher because you're a thermal system, just like Utah Power and Light Company, whose rates are double what ours are. They're authorized under the Idaho Public Utilities Law. They're authorized the same rate of return for their stockholders that we are, but our rates are way lower because we're a hydro system, and that's the genesis of what we're talking about.
Let me ask about one, in that context, one number that you have used in some of those ads, not in that particular one. $53 million is the potential increased cost of what is referred to as total subordination. Aren't you really talking there about total development of the land once subordination occurs? Subordination would not automatically, would it mean the development of the land?
No, it would not immediately, but it's the development. And again, how much development you're going to have, I don't know. And I don't think anybody
Nobody's
else does.
estimating that it would be total, though.
No, not well. I don't know whether they might. It depends on what happens with the agricultural products. If the price goes up, you've got 4 billion or 5 billion people now, and the year 2000, that's only 18 years or 16 years hence. You're going to have 6 billion people in the world. You know, all of those things go into the whole ball of wax, and I don't think there's anybody sitting here today can say that there won't be a complete development or far more development. You see, back in the 1970s and the late 1960s and the 70s, they were putting on land at a rate of about 100,000 acres a year, because you could go out and open up a potato farm and pay it off practically in 1 year. That could happen in the future. I don't know, and I don't think there's anybody else can say that it won't happen. So what we believe, and one of the things when we were in the 70s, we were having to build new projects, and they were at an increased cost. And primarily those increased projects we were putting on were because of the fact we were driven by a summer load, primarily irrigation. And we were putting on new projects. Well, that cost everybody higher rates. And everybody came in and said to Idaho Power Company, why are you increasing your rate? They didn't say to the person who was developing land and putting that irrigation to use, why did you do that to cause our rates increase? They came around to Idaho Power Company and says, why are you increasing those rates?
The case that you're trying to make in that commercial, those series of commercials, the case that subordination would be bad for existing irrigators is one that you appear to be having some difficulty making, particularly in the Magic Valley, judging from the reaction of those commercials. Certainly two incumbent legislators who were big opponents of subordination had trouble making that case and lost in the primary. Why aren't existing, if the argument is so good, why are existing irrigators not seeing that subordination is bad for them?
I think a majority of the existing irrigators are seeing it. David Little, for example, is an existing irrigator. Quite a number.
He's primarily a rancher, though, rather than.
Oh yes, but he irrigates a lot. If you go out by Willow Creek, you'll see he's and there's a number of individuals. I can't cite by verse and page, but a number that realize that there is a problem with respect to it. We had a testimony from the manager of Bell Rapids, for example, who's they're a large irrigation user. Against subordination. So there are a large number of them. Now, there's difference down in Twin Falls and in the Magic Valley, and there was two individuals. I don't know what happened with respect to it. I know that Hollifield, it's my understanding that in Minidoka and Cassia County, where the issue was very heavy, he carried those two counties, but I don't know, and he lost by 46 votes, which is a very small loss, and why it happened, I don't know.
Let me ask you, in a very general sense, over the years you've had in the past a fairly close relationship with the agricultural community. The Idaho Power encouraged irrigation.
Yes.
The rates have been proportionately rather low. The rate design has benefited irrigators. Has that undergone a sea change? Is that ever going to be the same again?
Well, I don't really think it's undergone a change for the vast amount of irrigators, because we still have any comparison that you make on irrigation rates. We're so far below any other company that it's almost astounding. And we sell to irrigation at a rate below cost. You know, that's one of the methods that you use to determine rates is a cost of service. Our rate to irrigation is below the cost of service, historically has been, and I anticipate probably will be in the future. So I think the majority of the irrigators, and particularly those that are irrigating at the present time, understand and realize that they have a rate that's far lower than any other irrigators in the surrounding states.
In a number of instances, that rate has even been kept lower than your company asked to have it kept by the Public Utilities Commission.
Well,
is there too much?
We didn't specifically on irrigation rate. We asked for an increase across the board, and we didn't get the full amount that we asked for, but so the irrigation and residential and the others were in the same proportion.
Let me take some other subjects so we don't spend the whole half hour on this fascinating but complicated subject. You are currently, I believe, appealing a denial of a request to lower the rates that you have to pay for power produced by small power producers.
Yes.
The PUC has essentially said, not essentially, it has said, that it believes that you are trying to harass these small power producers basically out of existence and ignore the federal law that requires you to purchase the power. How do you respond to that fairly strong language?
It was very strong language, and it's essentially wrong. We're not trying to harass small power producers or co-generators. We do have a problem. And again, the problem goes back to ratepayers. We're having to pay a substantially higher price than what we sell power for to the co-generators, and we're signing up a contract for a 35-year period, which is required by the commission, basically. This puts into question what the situation is going to be in the future. We have no control over the small power production. For example, just as this TV station or anybody in their business, they plan. They try to plan what they need to do. If you're at a grocery business, how many oranges are going to be used, so you order those grocery oranges ahead of time. Well, in the power production business, we do the same thing. We make forecasts and try to schedule Swan Falls or whatever it might be in accordance with the time that'll be needed. Sometimes you miss somewhat, but basically that's what you do. Well, we have to buy cogenerators when they come on the line. We have no control over when they come on the line. We have no control over their reliability. We have no control over the safety of the dam and the facility from the standpoint of power generation. So that poses a real problem to us. Now, we have not opposed cogeneration. The Federal Act was designed to cut down on the use of imported oil. That was the whole genesis, the whole reason for the Federal Act. We haven't used a quart of oil in 10 years.
Does the federal law need to be changed?
Well, I think that there's a, well, the question is, you take down in California, for example, or back in New York, they've been burning imported oil and burning a lot of it. Well, that's a real problem. Heck, it doesn't take any genius to figure out, just like with what's happening in Iraq and Iran in the Strait of Hormuz right now, it doesn't take any genius to figure that we've got to cut down on that utilization of oil. For those areas, it makes a great deal of sense. But the thing is, down in California, that they're paying less, basically, than the price they're selling it for. We're paying 2 to 3 times what we're selling it for. And that poses a kind of a funny problem.
Compared to some of your own costs, though, the cogen rate isn't high. Is it? It's 6.5 cents. You're talking about Cascade at what, 8.5?
Well, yes, but let me tell you something. You got a 35-year contract that you signed for, and the avoided cost is here, and that's the avoided.
Don't know that anybody's going to be able to see that.
The avoided cost is the cost theoretically of the first year of that plant. Now, when you build a power plant, the Idaho Power Company, in our rate, there's a depreciation factor that goes on every year. And if you have a thermal plant, for example, at the end of 35 years, that's essentially depreciated out because it's on a 35-year basis. So, and our hydro facility is about 50 years. So that's why down at Swan Falls, at various of our power plants, that keeps the cost keeps going down. And every time we go in for a rate case, that reduces the rate base, and as a consequence, reduces the cost of that plant. But a cogeneration plant instead escalates over a 35-year period. At the end of 35 year, your cost of the cogeneration plant is up higher, far higher, and the cost of the plant owned by Idaho Power Company and paid for by the ratepayers at the end of the 35 years or 50 years, you as a ratepayer essentially have paid it off and are getting very cheap power.
So the two really aren't comparable.
No, they're not comparable.
Let's get just about a couple of things in the time that we have remaining. The Northwest Power Council, in its 2-year plan, has essentially asked Idaho Power to spill water over its dams in the spring to help the fish run. How have you responded to that?
Well, we have said that we would cooperate with the fish flush, subject to the realization that you have certain problems. We have problems under our federal license at Brownlee, Oxbow, and Hells Canyon, under which we have to have certain minimum flows go down the river all the year. We have the realization that sometimes you have a drought. We had one in 77 and 79, that if you take a fish flush in May out of Brownlee Dam, you're not going to fill it again. We also have the problem that the Brownlee Dam is the only private dam that they were talking about for the fish flush. Dvorak is a federal Army Engineers dam, and they've had problems with respect to how much would be taken out of it. Some of the studies that were made showed that Brownlee would take the biggest part of the fish flush, and Dvorak would be relatively not used. Now that has been changed somewhat. So we're certainly, from the company standpoint, we're committed to keeping the fish runs going. We have the steelhead hatchery that have been going successfully. We have the spring Chinook facilities up at Rapid River that have really put back, I guess, 50% of the run on the Columbia River is spring Chinook. So we're committed to it, but we have to realize, and we have talked with the council with respect to it, that it's something that has to be done carefully and well thought out.
Let me ask you a couple of more philosophical questions just in the last couple of minutes. You're in it. Back in the 50s, and the word gold medal home is kind of famous now. The promotion of the use of electricity. You are now in a surplus situation. You've got some projects coming online for whatever reasons. The Public Utilities Commission is forcing you to buy small power production. Are you now again in a situation where your only strategy from a stockholder's point of view is to promote the use of more electricity?
Well, when you say from a stockholder strategy, I guess I don't
Making
quite
your
agree
rate
with that.
of return.
I've been talking about the ratepayers.
Sure, but you have to make your rate of, as much of
yeah.
your rate of return as you can. You have an
Well,
obligation to your
that's true, but
stockholders, too.
if you have a lot of surplus power, and you can only sell it, say, for like probably selling it today for 9 mils or 9/10 of a cent, that poses some problems because you have to make your operating costs. So we're not looking for gold medallion homes as such, but we think that across the nation there is quite a bit of change. In Oregon, for example, the Oregon Commissioner is having full-scale hearings on that question right now, on the basis that maybe they should go back into using more electricity. Electricity is a great thing for the country, for the housewife, for everyone, and again on that surplus question, certainly we have a surplus at the present time and for the foreseeable future. But what happens if the subordination goes through? I don't know. Our forecasts are based upon the situation as it exists now. It encompasses some irrigation, but it doesn't encompass what could possibly happen with an end of subordination. And again, that's summertime. The summertime is where we have the real problem because the water flow drops. The irrigation load, our irrigation load in the summertime is over 40% of our load at various times in the summertime, and that hits us right at the time when we have when our hydro generation is falling. So it's a very complex. There's a lot of people, I think, that electricity is a very simple deal, but it is not. It takes a lot of careful consideration and planning and realizing how you coalesce things together so that you'll have the electricity that you want when you want to turn on that switch.
Can you draw any conclusions from the round and coming back full circle to subordination, just very briefly, can you draw any conclusions from the primary elections as to whether you've got a tougher fight or a not so tough fight on your hands next year?
Well, I'm certainly not any expert on the. As a matter of fact, with the Sunshine Law, I stay way out of it.
All right.
And I think basically there was a lot of people that supported the Idaho Power Company's position. There was a couple that may not be there, but there were some others that I think might possibly agree with the ratepayers' position.
Thank you. We are out of time. I'd like to thank you very much for being with us tonight, Mr. Bruce. That's all the time we have. We'll be back here tomorrow night. I'm Jean McNeil. Good night.
The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of 4, 10, and 12.